In my last video, I talked about the true meaning behind Stolas' song to Octavia. In that song, he briefly mentioned these 7 rings, and no, not those ones, but these 7 rings of hell. And it left us wondering what the hell the horny hooter was on about. As such, I've taken it upon myself to try and figure out what the rings of hell actually are, and what importance they serve to the story. Before I start, I definitely recommend subscribing to my channel. I make theory, review and analysis videos on cartoons such as Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss, and more that you should check out on my channel page after watching this video. So outside of the brief mention of them in the song, do we know anything else about the rings? Technically not too much. However, we did get a short tweet which may have revealed more than it may seem. It reads as follows: Loo Loo Land is in the Greed Ring of Hell. Only hellborn species can traverse the rings, while dead sinners can only exist in the top ring, Pride. The first thing to quickly note is that sinners apparently can't traverse the rings. In case you don't know, sinners are demons that were born on Earth and died a sinner. While we now know who can traverse them, how the rings are actually traversed is currently unknown. Possibly via a portal or a more simple mode of transport such as a train of some kind. What's really interesting, however, is that this tweet not only names 2 of the rings and tells us where the Pride ring is in relation to the other rings, but it also tells us that the rings may each represent a particular sin. Not just any sin, but 2 of these 7 deadly sins. Simple enough. However, it gets a bit crazier. In German bishop and theologian Peter Binsfeld's classification of demons, he proposes that there are 7 princes of hell, 2 of them being Lucifer and Mammon, who represent pride and greed respectively. And it just so happens that these demons exist in Hazbin Hotel's universe. As we know, Lucifer is the king of hell and Charlie's dad. Mammon is easier to miss, but appeared by name and in the form of a logo in Loo Loo Land. Not much is yet known about Mammon, but he appears to have investments in the Greed Ring, and it can be suspected that he may be a powerful figure there, most likely an overlord. So here's my hypothesis. Although he's the king of hell, it's possible that the Lucifer in Hazbin Hotel took inspiration from Binsfeld's Lucifer, and that he may be Prince of the Pride Ring. This checks out as he and his family reside here. Mammon, on the other hand, would be the Prince of the Greed Ring, as it's where Loo Loo Land is located. It's worth mentioning that the in-universe term may not be princes, but the important thing to note is that they would be overlords with some kind of authority over their respective ring, which we already know to be true for Lucifer. Satan has also been mentioned by name in Helluva Boss, and is confirmed to be a separate entity from Lucifer. In Binsfeld's classification, Satan is the demon prince of wrath. We can then assume that the rulers of the other rings correspond to the other demons in Binsfeld's classification. 7 rings, 7 deadly sins, and 7 demon princes. As a side note, Binsfeld isn't the first person to associate these demons with these 7 deadly sins, but he is the first to state that they were princes, which more closely aligns with what we know to be true about Vivzi's canon. So we've established that these 7 rings of hell are most likely governed by 7 demon princes. So are there any other qualities that the rings may have? Well, another canon that Vivzi draws upon is the anonymous demonology grimoire, the Lesser Key of Solomon. We know this as it's the origin in which Stolas himself is based upon. The first book of this collection, titled Ars Goetia, describes 7 demons referred to as the Goetic princes, and Stolas just so happens to be one of them. The fact that there are 7 of them leads me to believe that each of the 7 rings may have their own Goetic prince, perhaps with jurisdiction over things which the main princes do not. This may specifically pertain to witchcraft, as witchcraft is intrinsic to the Ars Goetia in the grimoire. Now we know a fair bit about the demons and how they relate to the rings. But the question remains, why rings? The concept of hell consisting of rings is not new to Hazbin Hotel, and Vivzi may have taken inspiration from the 9 circles of hell in Dante's Inferno, with Vivian adapting the rings to correspond to Binsfeld's classification, rather than the 9 sins seen in Inferno. While the 9 circles were referenced in the Hazbin Hotel pilot, it's likely this is either a continuity error, or that the concept of what hell would be was altered post-pilot. The final question is what each ring might mean for its inhabitants. For one thing, I think it's safe to assume that inhabitants of each ring are more inclined to suffer with the sin associated with their specific ring. This may mean the conditions of some rings may reflect their sin. For example, it seems like the Greed ring is full of imps, the lowest classed species, which may suggest that this ring is more inclined to poverty than the other rings. This means we might see Wrath, for example, with more violent inhabitants, or the demons in the Lust ring might be more, you know.
Oh, harder, Daddy!
As for Pride, the inhabitants may be more all across the board in terms of sin. For one thing, every single sinner on Earth winds up here. Why Pride? Historically, pride is known to be the root of all evil, and the beginning of sin. In other words, pride can lead to any other sin. This could also be why the baddest of the bad, Lucifer himself, the king of hell, resides here. Well, that's all I got so far. Comment with your theories down below, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.